to A Quiet Revolution, a series of leftist and Marxist readings. Today we are picking up a new book, What is to be Done by V.I.Lenin himself. We will try to read this book chapter by chapter. If you would like me to read the editor's note and the preface, let me know. Otherwise, today I'm just getting started with chapter 1 directly. Dogmatism and freedom of criticism. I think it's interesting how 100 years later almost we still haven't figured out any of this. And I think of what's happening in the Labour Party in the UK and many other parties around the world. But without any further ado, chapter 1, Dogmatism and freedom of criticism. Subchapter A, what is freedom of criticism? Freedom of criticism. This undoubtedly is the most fashionable slogan at the present time, and the one most frequently employed in the controversies between the socialists and democrats of all countries. At first sight, nothing would appear to be more strange than the solemn appeals by one of the parties to the dispute for freedom of criticism. Can it be that some of the progressive parties have raised their voices against the constitutional law of the majority of European countries, which guarantees freedom to science and scientific investigation? Something must be wrong here. An onlooker who has not yet fully appreciated the nature of the disagreements among the controversialists will say, when he hears this fashionable slogan repeated at every crossroad. Evidently, this slogan is one of the most conventional phrases which, like a nickname, becomes legitimized by customs, he will conclude. In fact, it is no secret that two separate tendencies have been formed in international social democracy. The fight between these tendencies now flares up in a bright flame and now dies down and smolders under the ashes of imposing resolutions for an armistice. What this new tendency, which adopts a critical attitude towards obsolete doctrinaire Marxism represents, has been stated with sufficient precision by Bernstein and demonstrated by Milrand. Side note, he uses a lot of sort of brackets. For example, in this last sentence, what this new tendency, which adopts a critical attitude towards obsolete doctrinaire Marxism represents, it's all bracketed like this. There are also many footnotes that are quite chunky, so I might read them at the end of this for those who are interested. End of the side note. Social democracy must change from a party of the social revolution into a democratic party of social reforms. Bernstein has surrounded this political demand by a whole battery of symmetrically arranged new arguments and reasonings. The possibility of putting socialism on a scientific basis and of proving that it is necessary and inevitable from the point of view of the materialist conception of history was denied. The fact of increasing poverty, proletarianization, the growing acuteness of capitalist contradictions were also denied. The very conception of ultimate aim was declared to be unsound, and the idea of the dictatorship of the proletariat was absolutely rejected. It was denied that there is any difference in principle between liberalism and socialism. The theory of the class struggle was rejected on the grounds that it could not be applied to strictly democratic societies, governed accordingly to the will of the majority, etc. Thus, the demand for a decided change from revolutionary social democracy to bourgeois reformism was accompanied by a no less decided turn towards bourgeois criticism of all the fundamental ideas of Marxism. As this criticism of Marxism has been ongoing for a long time now, from the political platform, from university chairs, in numerous pamphlets, and in a number of scientific works, as the younger generation of the educational classes have been systematically trained for decades on this criticism, it is not so surprising that the new critical tendencies in social democracy should spring up, all complete, like Minerva from the head of Jupiter. This new tendency did not have to grow and develop, it was transferred bodily from bourgeois literature to socialist literature. If Bernstein's theoretical criticism and political yearnings are still obscure to anyone, the trouble the French have taken to demonstrate the new method should remove all ambiguities. In this instance, also, France has justified its old reputation as the country in which, more than anywhere else, the historical class struggles were always fought to a finish. The French socialists have commenced not to theorize, but to act. The more developed democratic political conditions in France have permitted them to put Bernsteinism into practice immediately, with its inevitable consequences. Belran has proved an excellent example of practical Bernsteinism. It is not surprising that he so zealously defends and praises Bernstein and Volmar. Indeed, if social democracy in essentials is merely a reformist party and must be bold enough to admit this openly, then not only has a socialist the right to join a bourgeois cabinet, but he ought always to strive to obtain places in it. If democracy in essence means the abolition of class domination, then why should not a socialist minister charm the whole bourgeois world by orations on class cooperation? Why should he not remain in the cabinet even after the shooting down of workers by gendarmes has exposed, for the hundredth and thousandth time, the real nature of the democratic cooperation of classes? Why should he not personally take part in welcoming the tsar, for whom the French socialists now have no other sobriquet than the hero of the gallows, knout and punishment? And the reward for this humiliation and self-degradation of socialism in the face of the whole world, for the corruption of the socialist consciousness of the working class, the only thing that can guarantee victory. The reward for this is imposing plans for niggardly reforms, as niggardly in fact that much more has been obtained even from bourgeois governments. He who does not deliberately close his eyes cannot fail to see that the new critical tendency in socialism is nothing more nor less than a new species of opportunism. And if we judge people not by the brilliant uniforms they deck themselves in, not by the imposing appellation they give themselves, but by their actions and by what they actually advocate, it will be clear that freedom of criticism means freedom from an opportunistic tendency in social democracy, the freedom to convert social democracy into a democratic reformist party, the freedom to introduce bourgeois ideas and bourgeois elements into socialism. Freedom is a grand word, but under the banner of free trade, the most predatory wars were conducted. Under the banner of free labor, the toilers were robbed. The term freedom of criticism contains the same inherent falsehood. Those who are really convinced that they have advanced science would demand not freedom for the new views to continue side by side with the old, but the substitution of the old views by the new views. The cry, "Long live freedom of criticism," that is heard today too strongly calls to mind the fable of the empty barrel. We are marching in a compact group along a precipitous and difficult path, firmly holding each other by the hand. We are surrounded on all sides by enemies and are under their almost constant fire. We have combined voluntarily, especially for the purpose of fighting the enemy and not to retreat into the adjacent marsh, the inhabitants of which, right from the very outset, have reproached us with having separated ourselves into an exclusive group and with having chosen the path of struggle instead of the path of conciliation. And now, several in our crowd begin to cry out, "Let us go into this marsh." And when we begin to shame them, they retort, "How conservative you are! Are you not ashamed to deny us the right to invite you to take a better road?" Oh yes, gentlemen, you are free not only to invite us, but to go yourself wherever you will, even into the marsh. In fact, we think that the marsh is your proper place, and we are prepared to render you every assistance to get there. Only let go of our hands, don't clutch at us, and don't besmirch the grand word freedom, for we too are free to go where we please, free not only to fight against the marsh, but also those who are turning towards the marsh. Subchapter B. The new advocates of freedom of criticism. Now, this slogan, freedom of criticism, is solemnly advanced in number 10 of Рабочее дело, the organ of the League of Russian Social Democrats abroad, not as a theoretical postulate, but as a political demand, as a reply to the question, is it possible to unite a social democratic organization operating abroad? In order that unity may be durable, there must be freedom of criticism. Page 36. From these statements, two very definite conclusions must be drawn. One, that Рабочее дело has taken the opportunist tendency in international social democracy under its wing, and two, that Рабочее дело, forgive me, I'm not pronouncing it right. Two, that Рабочее дело demands freedom for opportunism in Russian social democracy. We shall examine these conclusions. Рабочее дело is particularly displeased with Iskra's and Zarya's inclination to predict a rupture between the mountain and the Gironde in international social democracy. As a side note, a bold assertion. Krzyzewski, have you heard the fact long ago noted that it is precisely the extensive participation of the academic stratum in the socialist movement in recent years that has secured the rapid spread of Bernsteinism? And what is the most important? On what does our author base his opinion that even the most pronounced Bernsteinists stand on the basis of the class struggle for the political and economic emancipation of the proletariat? No one knows. This determined defense of the most pronounced Bernsteinist is not supported by any kind of argument whatsoever. Apparently, the author believes that if he repeats what the pronounced Bernsteinists say about themselves, his assertion requires no proof. But can anything more shallow be imagined than an opinion of a whole tendency that is based on nothing more than what the representative of that tendency say about themselves? Can anything more shallow be imagined than the subsequent homily about the two different and even diametrically opposed types of paths of party development? The German Social Democrats, you see, recognize complete freedom of criticism, but the French do not, and it's precisely the latter that presents an example of the harmfulness of intolerance. To which we reply that the very example Krzyzewski quote illustrates how even those who regard history literally from the Blavatsky point of view sometimes describe themselves as Marxists. Of course, there is no need whatever in explaining the unity of the German Socialist Party and its member state of the French Socialist Party, to search for the special feature in the history of the respective countries, to compare the condition of military semi-absolutism in the one country with republican parliamentarism in the other, or to analyze the effects of the Paris Commune and the effects of the anti-socialist law in Germany, to compare the economic life and economic development of the two countries, or recall that the unexampled growth of German social democracy was accomplished by a strenuous struggle, unexampled in the history of socialism, not only against the theoreticians Mühlenberg, Dühring, the socialist of the chair, but also against mistaken tactics, Lassalle, etc., etc. All that is superfluous. The French quarrel among themselves because they are intolerant. The Germans are united because they are good fellows. And observe, this piece of much less profundity is intended to refute the fact which is a complete answer to the defense of Bernsteinism. The question as to whether the Bernsteinists stand on the basis of the class struggle of the proletariat can be completely and irrevocably answered only by historical experience. Consequently, the example of France is the most important one in this respect, because France is the only country in which the Bernsteinists attempted to stand independently on their own feet with the warm approval of their German colleagues, and partly also of the Russian opportunists. The reference to the intolerance of the French, apart from its historical significance in the Nostrev sense, turns out to be merely an attempt to obscure a very unpleasant fact with angry invectives. but we are not even prepared to make a present of the Germans to Krzyzewski and to the other numerous champions of freedom of criticism. The most pronounced Bernsteinists are still tolerated in the ranks of the German party only because they submit to the Hanover Resolution, which emphatically rejected Bernstein's amendments, and to the Lübeck Resolution, which, notwithstanding the diplomatic terms in which it is couched, contains a direct warning to Bernstein. It is a debatable point from the standpoint of the interest of the German party as to whether diplomacy was appropriate in this case, and whether in this case a bad peace is better than a good quarrel. Opinions may differ in regards to the expedience or not of the methods employed to reject Bernsteinism, but the fact remains that the German party did reject Bernsteinism on 2 occasions. Therefore, to think that the German example endorses the thesis, the most pronounced Bernsteinists stand for the proletarian class struggle for its economic and political emancipation, means to fail absolutely to understand what is going on before one's eyes. More than that, as we have already observed, Rabochet-Diello comes before Russian social democracy, demands freedom of criticism, and defends Bernsteinism. Apparently, it came to the conclusion that we were unfair to our critics and Bernsteinists. To whom we were unfair, when and how? About this, not a word. Rabochet-Diello does not name a single Russian critic of Bernsteinists. All that is left for us to do is to make one of 2 possible suppositions. First, that the unfairly treated party is none other than Rabochet-Diello itself, and that appears to be confirmed by the fact that in the 2 articles in number 10 reference is made only to the insults hurled at the Rabochet-Diello by Zarya and Iskra. If that is the case, how is the strange fact to be explained that Rabochet-Diello, which always vehemently dissociates itself from Bernstein, could not defend itself without putting in a word on behalf of the most pronounced Bernsteinist and of freedom of criticism? The second supposition is that a third party has been treated unfairly. If the second supposition is correct, why should not this party be named? We see, therefore, that Rabochet-Diello is continuing to play the game of hide-and-seek that it has played, as we shall prove below, ever since it commenced publication. And not the first practical application of this much extolled freedom of criticism. As a matter of fact, not only has it now been reduced to abstention from all criticism, but also to abstention from expressing independent views altogether. The very Rabochet-Diello which avoids mentioning Russian Bernsteinism as if it were a shameful disease, to use Starover's apt expression, proposes for the treatment of this disease to copy word for word the latest German prescription for the treatment of the German variety of the disease. Instead of freedom of criticism, slavish, worse, monkey-like imitation. The very same social and political content of modern international opportunism reveals itself in a variety of ways according to its national characteristics. In one country, the opportunists long ago came out under a separate flag, while in the other, they ignore theory and conduct a radical socialist policy of practical politics. In a third country, several members of the Revolutionary Party have deserted to the camp of opportunism and strive to achieve their aims not by an open struggle for principle and for the new tactics, but by gradual, unobserved, and if one may so express it, unpunishable corruption of their party. In a fourth country again, similar deserters employ the same methods in the twilight of their political slavishness, and with an extremely original combination of legal with illegal activity, etc., etc. To talk about freedom of criticism and Bernsteinism as a condition for uniting the Russian Social Democrats, and not to explain how Russian Bernsteinism has manifested itself and what fruits it has borne, means to talk for the purpose of saying nothing. We shall try, if only a few words, to say what Rabochet-Diello did not want to say, or perhaps did not even understand. Subchapter C. Criticism in Russia. The peculiar position of Russia in regard to the point we are examining is that right from the very beginning of the spontaneous labor movement on the one hand, and the change of progressive public opinion towards Marxism on the other, a combination was observed of obviously heterogeneous elements under a common flag for the purpose of fighting the common enemy, obsolete social and political views. 1 second, I just have to check that. That the recording is still ongoing. Sorry about that. We refer to the heyday of legal Marxism. Speaking generally, this was an extremely curious phenomenon that no one in the 80s or the beginning of the 90s would have believed possible. Suddenly, in a country ruled by an autocracy in which the press is completely shackled, and in a period of intense political reaction in which even the tiniest outgrowth of political discontent and protest was suppressed, a censored literature springs up, advocating the theory of revolutionary Marxism in a language extremely obscure but understood by those interested. The government had accustomed itself to regard only the theory of revolutionary populism as dangerous without observing its internal evolution, as is usually the case, and rejoicing at the criticism leveled against it, no matter from what side it came. Quite a considerable time elapsed, according to our Russian calculations, before the government realized what had happened, and the unwieldy army of censors and gendarmes discovered the new enemy and flung itself upon him. Meanwhile, Marxian books were published one after another, Marxian journals and newspapers were published. Nearly everyone became a Marxist. Marxism was flattered, the Marxists were courted, and the book publishers rejoiced at the extraordinary ready sale of Marxian literature. It is quite reasonable to suppose that among the Marxian novices who were carried away by this stream, there was more than one author who got a swelled head. We can now speak calmly of this period as of an event of the past. It is no secret that the brief appearance of Marxism on the surface of our literature was called forth by the alliance between people of extreme and of extremely moderate views. In point of fact, the latter were bourgeois democrats, and this was the conclusion, so strikingly confirmed by their subsequent critical development, that intruded itself on the mind of certain persons, even when the alliance was still intact. That being the case, does not the responsibility for the subsequent confusion rest mainly upon the revolutionary social democrats who entered into alliance with these future critics? This question, together with a reply in the affirmative, is sometimes heard from people with excessively rigid views. But these people are absolutely wrong. Only those who have no reliance in themselves can fear to enter into temporary alliance with unreliable people. Besides, not a single political party could exist without entering into such alliances. The combination with the legal Marxist was, in its way, the first really political alliance contracted by Russian social democrats. Thanks to this alliance, an astonishingly rapid victory was obtained over populism, and Marxian ideas, even though in a vulgarized form, became very widespread. Moreover, the alliance was not concluded altogether without conditions. The proof, the burning by the censors in 1895 of the Marxian Symposium, materials on the problem of the economic development of Russia. If the literary agreements with the legal Marxists can be compared with a political alliance, then that book can be compared with a political treaty. The rupture, of course, did not occur because the allies proved to be bourgeois democrats. On the contrary, the representative of the latter tendency were the natural and desirable allies of the social democrats, insofar as their democratic tasks that were brought to the front by the prevailing situation in Russia were concerned. But an essential condition for such an alliance must be complete liberty for socialists to reveal to the working class that its interests are diametrically opposed to the interests of the bourgeois. and critical tendency to which the majority of the legal Marxists turned deprived the socialists of this liberty and corrupted socialist consciousness by vulgarizing Marxism, by preaching the toning down of social antagonism, by declaring the idea of the social revolution and the dictatorship of the proletariat to the absurd, by restricting the labor movement and the class struggle to narrow trade unionism and to a practical struggle for petty gradual reforms. This was tantamount to the bourgeois democrats' denial of socialism's right to independence and consequently of its right to existence. In practice, it meant a striving to convert the nascent labor movement into a tale of the liberals. Naturally, under such circumstances, a rupture was necessary, but the peculiar feature of Russia manifested itself in that this rupture simply meant the closing to the Social Democrats of access to the most popular and widespread legal literature. The ex-Marxists who took up the flag of criticism and who obtained almost a monopoly in the sale of Marxism entrenched themselves in this literature. Catchwords like against orthodoxy and long-live freedom of criticism, now repeated by Rabouche-Ideal, immediately became the fashion, and the fact that neither the censor nor the gendarmes could resist this fashion is apparent from the publication of 3 Russian editions of Bernstein's celebrated book, celebrated in Herostraus's sense, and from the fact that the books by Bernstein, Prokopovich, and others were recommended by Zubotov. And this tendency did not confine itself to the sphere of literature. The turn towards criticism was accompanied by the turn towards economism that was taken by social democratic practical workers. The manner in which the contacts and mutual dependence between legal criticism and illegal economisms arose and grew is an interesting subject in itself and may very well be treated in a special article. It is sufficient to note here that these contacts undoubtedly existed. The notoriety deservedly acquired by the Credo was due precisely to the frankness with which it formulated these contacts and laid down the fundamental political tendency of economisms. Naturally, under such circumstances, a rupture was necessary, but the peculiar feature of Russia manifested itself in that this rupture simply meant the closing to the Social Democrats of access to the most popular and widespread legal literature. The ex-Marxists who took up the flag of criticism and who obtained almost a monopoly in the sale of Marxism entrenched themselves in this literature. Catchwords like against orthodoxy and long-live freedom of criticism, now repeated by Rabouche-Ideal, immediately became the fashion, and the fact that neither the censor nor the gendarmes could resist this fashion is apparent from the publication of 3 Russian editions of Bernstein's celebrated book, and from the fact that the books by Bernstein's, Prokopovich, and others were recommended by Zubotov. And this tendency did not confine itself to the sphere of literature. The turn towards criticism was accompanied by the turn towards economism that was taken by social democratic practical workers. The manner in which the contacts and mutual dependence between legal criticism and illegal economisms arose and grew is an interesting subject in itself and may very well be treated in a special article. It is sufficient to note here that these contracts undoubtedly exist. The notoriety deservedly acquired by the Credo was due precisely to the frankness with which it formulated these contacts and laid down the fundamental political tendency of economism. Let the workers carry on the economic struggle, it would be more correct to say the trade union struggle, because the latter embraces also specifically labor politics, and let the Marxist intelligentsia merge with the liberals for the political struggle. Thus, it turned out that trade union work among the people meant fulfilling the first part of this task, and legal criticism meant fulfilling the second part. This statement proved to be such an excellent weapon against economism that, had there been no Credo, it would have been worth inventing. The Credo was not invented, but it was published without the consent and perhaps even against the will of its authors. At all events, the present writer, who who is partly responsible for dragging this program into the light of day, has heard complaints and reproaches to the effect that copies of the resume of their views, which were dubbed the Credo, were distributed and even published in the press together with the protest. We refer to this episode because it reveals a very peculiar state of mind among our economists vis-à-vis a fear of publicity. This feature is common among the economists and not among the authors of the Credo alone. It was revealed by that most outspoken and honest advocate of economism, Rabochaya Misl, and by Rabochaya Dielo, which was indignant over the publication of economist documents in the Vademeku, as well as by the Kiev Committee, which 2 years ago refused to permit the publication of its Profession de foi, together with a protest that had been written against it, and by many other individual representatives of economism. This fear of criticism displayed by the advocates of freedom of criticism cannot be attributed solely to craftiness, although no doubt craftiness has something to do with it. It would be unwise to expose the young and as yet puny movement to the enemy's attack. No, the majority of the economists quite sincerely disapprove, and by the very nature of economism they must disapprove, of all theoretical controversies, factional disagreements, of broad political questions, of schemes for organizing revolutionaries, etc. Leave all these sort of things to the exiles abroad, said a fairly consistent economist to me one day, and thereby he expressed a very widespread, purely trade unionist view. Our business, he said, is the labor movement, the labor organizations, here in our localities. All the rest are merely the invention of doctrinaries, an exaggeration of the importance of ideology, as the authors of the letter published in Iskra number 12 expressed it in union with Rabochaya Dielo number 10. The question now arises, seeing what the peculiar features of Russian criticism and Russian Bernsteinism were, what should those who desired in deeds, and not merely in words, to oppose opportunism have done? First of all, they should have made efforts to resume the theoretical work that was only just commenced in the period of legal Marxism, and that has now again fallen on the shoulders of the illegal workers. Unless such work is undertaken, the successful growth of the movement is impossible. Secondly, they should have actively combated a legal criticism that was corrupting people's minds. Thirdly, they should have actively counteracted the confusion and vacillation prevailing in practical work, and should have exposed and repudiated every conscious or unconscious attempt to degrade our program and tactics. That Rabochaya Dielo did none of these things is a well-known fact, and further on we shall deal with this well-known fact from various aspects. At the moment, however, we desire merely to show what a glaring contradiction there is between the demand for freedom of criticism and the peculiar features of our native criticism and Russian economism. Indeed, glance at the text of the resolution by which the League of Russian Social Democrats abroad endorsed the point of view of Rabochaya Dielo. Bernsteinism, if it was not, then the reference to Lübeck is utterly absurd. But it is not true to say that it restricts freedom of criticism. In passing their Hanover resolution, the Germans point by point rejected precisely the amendments proposed by Bernstein, while in their Lübeck resolution they cautioned Bernstein personally and named him in the resolution. Our free imitators, however, do not make a single reference to a single manifestation of Russian criticism and Russian economism, and in view of this omission, they bear reference to the class and revolutionary characters of the theory, leaves exceedingly wide scope for misinterpretation, particularly when the League refuses to identify so-called economism with opportunism. But all these en passant, the important thing efforts, one can understand the motives of the majority in confining themselves to the dry rejection of innovations. In Russia, however, it is the critics and economists who are in favor of preserving what is. The critics wish us to continue to regard them as Marxist and to guarantee them the freedom of criticism which they enjoy to the full, for as a matter of fact, they never recognized any kind of party ties. And moreover, we never had a generally recognized party organ which could restrict freedom of criticism even by friendly advice. The economists want the revolutionary to recognize complete equality in the movement, i.e., to recognize the legitimacy of what exists. They do not want the ideologists to try to divert the movement from the path that is determined by the interaction of material elements and material environment. They want recognition for the only struggle that the workers can conduct under present condition, which in their opinion is the struggle which they are actually conducting at the present time. We revolutionary social democrats, on the contrary, are dissatisfied with this submission to elemental forces, i.e., by bowing to what is at the present time. We demand that the tactics that have prevailed in recent years be changed. We declare that before we can unite, and in order that we may unite, we must first of all firmly and definitely draw the lines of demarcation between the various groups. In a word, the Germans stand for what is and reject the changes. We demand changes and reject subservience to and conciliation with what is. This little difference our free copies of German resolutions failed to notice. Subchapter D. Angles on the importance of the theoretical struggle. Dogmatism, doctrinarianism, ossification of the party, the inevitable retribution that follows the violent straight-lacing of thought. These are the enemies against which the kindly champions of freedom of criticism are allying their forces in Yellow. We are very glad that this question has been brought up, and we would propose only to add to it another question. Who are to be the judges? Before us lie two publishers' announcements. One, the program of the periodical organ of the Russian Social Democratic League, Yellow, reprint from number 1 of Yellow, and the other, announcement of the resumption of publication of Truda. Both are dated 1899, when the crisis of Marxism had long been discussed. And what do we find? In the first production we would seek in vain for any manifestation or definite elucidation of the position the new organs intend to occupy. Of theoretical work and the urgent task that now confronted, not a word is said in this program, nor in the supplements to it that were passed by the Third Congress of the League in 1901. During the whole of this time, the editorial board of Yellow ignored the theoretical question, notwithstanding the fact that this question excited the minds of social democrats in all countries. The other announcement, on the contrary, first of all points to the diminution of interest in theory observed in recent years, imperatively demands vigilant attention to the theoretical aspect of the revolutionary movement of the proletariat, and calls for ruthless criticism of the Bernsteinist and other anti-revolutionary tendencies in our movement. The issues of Zarya that have appeared show to what extent this program was carried out. Thus, we see that high-sounding phrases against the ossification of thought conceal carelessness and helplessness in the development of the theoretical ideas. The case of the Russian Social Democrats strikingly illustrates the fact observed in the whole of Europe and long ago observed in German Marxism, that the notorious freedom of criticism implies not the substitution of one theory by another, but freedom from every complete and thought-out theory. It implies eclecticism and absence of principle. Those who are in the least acquainted with the actual state of our movement cannot but see that the spread of Marxism was accompanied by a certain deterioration of theoretical standards. Quite a number of people with very little and even totally lacking in theoretical training joined the movement for the sake of its practical significance and its practical successes. We can judge, therefore, how tactless Reboja ideology is when, with an air of invincibility, it quotes the statements of Marx that a single step of the real movement is worth 1,000 programs. To repeat those words in the epoch of theoretical chaos is sheer mockery. Moreover, these words of Marx are taken from his letter on the Gotha program, in which he sharply condemns eclecticism in the formulation of principle. If you must combine, Marx wrote to the party leaders, then enter into agreements to satisfy the practical aims of the movement, but do not haggle over principles, do not make concessions in theory. This was Marx's idea, and yet there are people among us who strive in his name to belittle the significance of theory. Without a revolutionary theory, there can be no revolutionary movement. This cannot be insisted upon too strongly at a time when the fashionable preaching of opportunism is combined with absorption in the narrowest forms of practical activity. The importance of theory for Russian Social Democrats is still greater for three reasons which are often forgotten. The first is that our party is only in the process of formation. Its features are only just becoming outlined, and it has not yet completely settled its reckoning with other tendencies in revolutionary thought, which threaten to divert the movement from the proper path. Indeed, in very recent times we have observed a revival of non-social democratic revolutionary tendencies. Under such circumstances, social democratic revolutionary tendencies. Indeed, in very recent times we have observed a revival of non-social democratic revolutionary tendencies. Under such circumstances, what at first sight appears to be an unimportant mistake may give rise to most deplorable consequences, and only the short-sighted would consider factional disputes and strict distinction of shades to be inopportune and superfluous. The fate of Russian social democracy for many, many years to come may be determined by the strengthening of one or the other shade. The second reason is that the social democratic movement is essentially an international movement. This does not mean merely that we must combat national chauvinism. It means also that a movement that is starting in a young country can be successful only on the condition that it assimilates the experience of other countries. In order to assimilate this experience, it is not sufficient merely to be acquainted with it or simply to transcribe the latest resolution. A critical attitude is required towards this experience, an ability to subject it to independent tests. Only those who realize how much the modern labor movement has grown in strength will understand what a reserve of theoretical forces and political as well as revolutionary experience is required to fulfill this task. The third reason is that the national task of Russian social democracy are such as have never confronted any other socialist party in the world. Further on, we shall deal with the political and organizational duties which the task of emancipating the whole people from the yoke of autocracy imposes upon us. At the moment, we wish merely to state that the role of vanguard can be fulfilled only by a party that is guided by an advanced theory. To understand what this means concretely, let the reader call to mind the predecessor of Russian social democracy like Herzen, Belsinki, Chernyshevsky, and the brilliant band of revolutionists of the 70s. Let him ponder over the world significance which Russian literature is now acquiring. Let him, but that is enough. We shall quote what Engels said in 1874 concerning the significance of the theory in the social democratic movement. Engels recognizes not two forms of the great circle social democracy is conducting, political and economic, as is the fashion among us, but three, adding to the first two also the theoretical struggle. His recommendations to the German labor movement, which has now become practically and politically strong, are so instructive from the point of view of present-day controversies that we hope the reader will forgive us for quoting a long passage from his introduction to the peasant war in Germany, which long ago became a literary rarity. two important advantages compared with the rest of Europe. First, they belong to the most theoretical people of Europe. Second, they have retained that sense of theory which the so-called educated people of Germany have totally lost. Without German philosophy, particularly that of Hegel, German scientific socialism, the only scientific socialism existent, would never have come into existence. Without a sense for theory, scientific socialism would have never become blood and tissue of the workers. What an enormous advantage this is may be seen, on the one hand, from indifference of the English labour movement towards all theory, which is one of the reasons why it moves so slowly in spite of the splendid organization of the individual unions. On the other hand, from the mischief and confusion created by Proudhonism in its original form among the Frenchmen and Belgians, and in its caricature form as presented by Bakunin among the Spaniards and Italians. The second advantage is that, chronologically speaking, the Germans were the last to appear in the labour movement. In the same manner as German theoretical socialism will never forget that it rests on the shoulders of Saint-Simon, Fourier and Owen, the three who, in spite of their fantastic notions and utopianism, belong to the most significant heads of all time, and whose genius anticipated the correctness of which can now be proved in a scientific way. So the practical German labour movement must never forget that it has developed on the shoulders of the English and French movement, that it had utilized their experience, acquired at a heavy price, and that for this reason it was in a position to avoid their mistakes, which in their time were unavoidable. Without the English trade unions and the French political workers' struggles preceding the German labour movement, without the mighty impulse given by the Paris Commune, where would we be now? It must be said to the credit of the German workers that they utilized the advantages of their situation with rare understanding. For the first time in the history of the labour movement, the struggle is being so conducted that its three sides, the theoretical, the political, and the practical economic resistance to the capitalist form one harmonious and well-planned entity. In this concentric attack, as it were, lies the strength and invincibility of the German movement. It is due to this advantageous situation on the one hand, to the insular peculiarities of the British, and to the cruel oppression of the French movements on the other, that for the present moment the German workers form that vanguard of the proletarian struggle. How long events will allow them to occupy this post of honor cannot be foreseen, but as long as they are placed in it, let us hope that they will discharge their duties in the proper manner. To this end, it will be necessary to double our energies in all the spheres of struggle and agitation. It is the specified duty of the leaders to gain an ever clearer understanding of the theoretical problems, to free themselves more and more from the influence of traditional phrases inherited from the old conceptions of the world, and constantly to keep in mind that socialism, having become a science, demands the same treatment as every other science. It must be studied. The task of the leaders will be to bring understanding thus acquired and clarified to the working masses, to spread it with increased enthusiasm, to close the ranks of the party organization and of the labor unions with ever greater energy. If the German workers proceed in this way, they may not march exactly at the head of the movement. It is not the interest of the movement that the workers of one country should march at the head of all, but they will occupy an honorable place on the battle line, and they will stand armed for battle when other unexpected grave trials or momentous events will demand heightened courage, heightened determination, and they will to act. Engel's words proved prophetic. Within a few years, the German workers were subjected to several trials in the form of the anti-socialist law, but they were fully armed to meet the situation and succeeded in emerging from it victoriously. The Russian workers will have to undergo trials immeasurably more severe. They will have to take up the fight against a monster compared with which anti-socialist law in a constitutional country are but pygmies. History has now confronted us with an immediate task which is more revolutionary than all the immediate tasks that confront the proletariat of any other country. The fulfillment of this task, the destruction of the most powerful bulwark, not only of European, but also, it might now be said, of Asiatic reaction, places the Russian proletariat in the vanguard of the international revolutionary proletariat. We shall have the right to count upon acquiring the honorable title already earned by our predecessors, the revolutionists of the 70s, if we succeed in inspiring our movement, which is 1,000 times wider and deeper, with the same devoted determination and vigor. Congrats if you made it till the end of chapter 1 of Lenin's What is to be done. We've had quite a few technical issues, hence the sudden videos instead of instead of me. But yeah, we've picked up this after quite a few months, so there's quite a few things that still need to be adjusted. But we hope to come back to be more. That didn't make any sense. It's incredibly late, and my brain is fried. We hope to start reposting more regularly and finishing book by book. If there's any book you would like to hear, please drop the name below in the comments, and of course like and subscribe so that we can help grow this channel together and get more people involved in hearing